Hi, we're back with you with Florida Medical Association's Hurricane Ian Recovery Series. My name is Trey Hutt. I'm an agent and adjuster and Hurricane Michael survivor, and I'm here to help you get through what is undoubtedly a tremendous upcoming effort. Um, I'd like to talk to you today about wind versus flood. Most hurricanes have some sort of combination of wind and flood elements. In Hurricane Michael, which was my experience, it was a very windy event. There's been a tremendous amount of flooding in Hurricane Ian, and that can be even more devastating. Um, Wind is from above and flood is from below generally. If water rises in your building, or if you have wave action against your building, that's flood insurance. If you have impact to your roof or a broken window and water rains in, you have rain intrusion, that's going to be wind coverage. And those are two different policies. Flood insurance is always, except with one exception I'll talk about a little bit later, but flood insurance on your building and your contents is going to be a completely separate policy from your normal property insurance. Federal insurance, federal rules dictate kind of how flood insurance works, and we'll talk a little bit about that. You may walk into your practice and see a lot of damage and be a little confused about what's flood and what's wind damage. The general trauma of everything and your lack of experience with this would make it seem a lot more difficult than it actually is in practice. In its simplest terms, if there's a line on the wall from where the water rose, everything below that line is flood damage probably, and everything above that is going to be wind damage. Now that's a general idea. Really what happens in the case of flood damage, let's assume for a minute you had water rise into your building and you also had roof damage, so you had rain intrusion. Well, how is that going to be handled? Well, what's going to happen from the flood insurance point of view is obviously all the carpeting and things on the floor were damaged by floodwaters. The process generally is to come in and cut the drywall out at 4 feet because it will have soaked up a good bit of water, and 4 feet is the width of a typical piece of drywall. So it's become common practice to do it that way. Everything above that line where you're looking at damage to ceilings, fixtures, the roof, things like that, those kinds of things will be paid by your wind adjuster. Now, you may get into a position, and if you do, you certainly are going to want some help. But there are occasions where you get the wind adjuster and the flood adjuster pointing at each other. And if you feel like you're in that situation, please get in contact with the FMA and let them reach out to me, and we'll help you figure out how to negotiate that. In good case scenarios, the best case scenarios, the wind and flood adjuster coordinate. They sort of pick who's got responsibility for what. And if that happens, the claims process generally goes much, much smoother. You should be aware that deductibles are a little bit different as well. When you're dealing with a flood insurance policy, you're going to have two deductibles, a separate deductible for your building and another deductible for your contents. The most common is $1,000 each. So you probably will have to pay the first $2,000 there. Wind deductibles are much different, and they're usually a percentage of your building coverage. If you have a 2% wind deductible and you have $1 million building, well, you can do the math on what 2% of $1 million is. There are flat deductibles for wind. They're much less common, and if you have one, you're in great shape. Obviously, that's less that you have to come out of pocket with. You should also be aware that flood insurance in some cases can be more limited in its coverage than your typical property insurance policy. You have to try to remember a property insurance policy is put together by an insurance company, and in an ideal situation, they're trying to compete in the regular market. That's not the case with flood insurance, where coverage is very carefully scripted and dictated by the federal government. And I have to tell you, my opinion is private industry does almost everything better than the federal government. So there are some quirks that might be unexpected. I'm not going to go through a list of them here, but there are some little quirks. So just be aware that your flood insurance policy is going to behave slightly differently than your typical property policy. I want to give you two exceptions to some of the flood rules I've given you. One is that for some of your medical equipment, some of you may have scheduled that equipment very specifically, like you would schedule personally, say a jewelry policy, or schedule guns or something like that that's a special value. Medical equipment is often scheduled on its own separate policy, And those policies do typically include flood coverage. So what I would tell you is if you have those equipment schedules and you have scheduled coverage for specific pieces of medical equipment, try to make sure that you get the coverage for that gear on that policy so that you can save your general flood insurance policy for other things, because you may be surprised at how quickly those expenses add up. The other thing that you may face, it's going to be probably fairly uncommon for most of you, but private flood insurance has made inroads into the state in the last 5, 6, 7 years. So some of you may have policies with a private company that are not stuck with the strictures of a federal flood insurance policy. And I don't want you to get confused, because federal flood insurance policies are issued by normal insurance companies. They pay the insurance companies to do the mechanics of issuing the policy, printing the policy, accepting payments, policy service, and claims, of course. But when I talk about private flood insurance, it is a flood policy designed by a private company, fully insured by that private company, and they tend to be broader, they have a little bit better coverage, and usually they have lower rates if they're available in your area. If you have specific technical questions about that, again, please reach out to the FMA so they can get in touch with me, and I'll be happy to answer specific technical questions. Always, 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 if you can, reach out to your agent. They should be able to quickly and easily answer your questions if they're able to function and their office is not completely damaged. Again, reach out to us if need be. And if you can, please join us on the 10th. We're going to have a live session, a webinar, and we'll answer questions live, and we'll be in league with some of the FMA staff, which will have some additional answers for recovery. Good luck, and we'll see you soon.